The orbital station called Crossing Winds floated in the darkness of space like a massive wheel of metal and light. Ships from dozens of worlds docked at its ports every day. Inside its halls, aliens of every shape and size walked together, doing business and making deals. The station had one rule that everyone followed: no fighting. It was neutral ground where even enemies could meet safely. Commander Deho stepped off his transport ship and looked around the docking bay. He had been in space for 5 years now, but he still found himself amazed by the variety of life in the galaxy. There were tall beings made of crystal that hummed when they moved. There were small furry creatures that traveled in groups and spoke in chirps. There were beings that floated without legs and others that had too many arms to count. He adjusted his uniform and headed toward the diplomatic sector. Earth had only joined the galactic community 3 years ago, and humanity was still new to most species. Some aliens were curious about humans. Others ignored them completely. A few seemed to look down on them as primitives who had barely learned to leave their own planet. Today, Deho was here for trade negotiations. Earth needed resources that were common in other star systems. In return, humanity offered things that other species found interesting: art, music, and unusual approaches to engineering problems. It was not glamorous work, but it was important. The reception hall was already crowded when Deho arrived. His translator device buzzed in his ear, converting dozens of alien languages into Korean. He nodded politely to a group of insect-like traders and made his way toward the refreshment area. The station served food and drinks from 100 worlds, though Deho had learned to be careful about what he consumed. Not everything that was safe for aliens was safe for human digestion. He picked up a glass of something that looked like water and was listed as safe for carbon-based life forms. As he turned away from the table, someone massive moved directly into his path. Deho tried to stop, but momentum carried him forward. The glass in his hand tipped, and its contents splashed across the chest of the being in front of him. Time seemed to slow down. The creature before him stood nearly 7 feet tall. Her body was covered in dark green scales that reflected the light like polished stones. She had a humanoid shape with 2 arms and 2 legs, but her head was distinctly reptilian with a powerful jaw and golden eyes that now fixed on Deho with sudden intensity. She wore armor that was decorated with symbols he did not recognize, and a ceremonial sash across her chest that was now soaked with liquid. The conversations around them died. Aliens stepped back, creating a circle of empty space. The reptilian woman's scales shifted color, darkening to a deep crimson. A low growl came from her throat. When she spoke, her voice was like gravel grinding together. The translator struggled for a moment before rendering her words. "You dare to stain the sash of a war mistress of the Kethran Empire?" Deho immediately bowed. "I am deeply sorry. It was an accident. Please allow me to—" "Silence!" Her hand moved to the weapon at her side, a blade that crackled with energy. "I am Valora, daughter of the Storm Clan, victor of the Battle of Crimson Sands. I have killed greater beings than you for lesser insults." Deho's heart pounded, but he kept his voice calm. "I meant no disrespect, War Mistress Valora. I will gladly pay for the cleaning of your sash or provide any reasonable compensation." Valora's eyes narrowed. Around them, other Kethrans had gathered, all watching with intense interest. One of them, an older male with scars across his scales, leaned close to Valora and whispered something. She listened, then nodded slowly. "You are human," she said, making the word sound like an accusation. "Yes, I am Commander Deho of the Earth Expeditionary Fleet." "Human," she repeated. She looked him up and down, and something like contempt crossed her features. A species that only yesterday learned to walk among the stars. A species with no honor, no history of true battle. She drew her blade fully. The energy field around it hummed, casting blue light across her face. "In my culture, such an insult can only be answered one way. I challenge you to single combat. A blood duel in the arena. Tomorrow when the station's sun reaches its peak." Gasps echoed through the crowd. Deho felt his stomach drop. "War Mistress, surely we can resolve this another way."
"I have apologized."
"I will make amends." "You speak of amends like a merchant speaks of credits." Valora's voice was cold. "But honor is not bought or sold. It is proven in combat. Do you accept my challenge, or do you shame your entire species by refusing?" Deho glanced around. He saw his fellow crew members in the crowd, their faces pale with worry. He saw the other aliens watching with fascination and excitement. He understood that refusing would not just make him look weak, it would make all of humanity look weak. He took a breath and stood straight. I accept your challenge, War Mistress Valora. She smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. Good. Perhaps you have some small measure of courage. The duel will be tomorrow at peak sun. We fight until one of us surrenders or dies. Those are the only two endings. She sheathed her blade and turned away, her warriors following behind her like shadows. The crowd erupted into chatter. Aliens pressed close to Daiho, some offering sympathy, others already discussing betting odds. A small blue creature tugged at his sleeve and said through the translator, Human, you should know. Valora has fought in 37 duels. She has never lost. 23 of her opponents died. You should leave the station now while you can. But Daiho knew he could not leave. He had accepted the challenge. Breaking his word would be worse than losing. He pushed through the crowd and made his way back to his ship. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Hyejin, met him at the airlock. She was a serious woman with sharp eyes and a tactical mind. I heard what happened, she said. This is bad. I know, Daiho replied. The Kethrans are one of the oldest warrior races in the galaxy. They have evolved for combat. Stronger bones, faster reflexes, redundant organs. Daiho, she could tear you apart with her bare hands. I know, he said again. He walked past her into the ship's common area and sat down heavily. But what choice did I have? If I had refused, every species in the galaxy would see humans as cowards. Our diplomatic efforts would be over. Hyejin sat across from him. So instead they will watch you die. Daiho was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Maybe. Or maybe they will learn that humans are not as easy to kill as they think. News of the duel spread through Crossing Wind Station faster than light itself. Within hours, every being on the station knew about the challenge. By evening, word had reached ships passing through the system. By morning, broadcasts were being sent to nearby worlds. A Kethran war mistress was going to fight a human in single combat. For most of the galaxy, this was entertainment. For humanity, it was something much more serious. The betting markets opened immediately. The odds were not in Daiho's favor. For every credit wagered on the human, 1,000 were placed on Valora. Some betting houses did not even offer odds on a human victory. They only took bets on how long Daiho would survive. The most optimistic estimates gave him 5 minutes. The pessimistic one said less than 1. In the Kethran section of the station, Valora sat in meditation. Her quarters were sparse and military in style. Weapons hung on the walls, each one marked with symbols representing a battle or a fallen opponent. A shrine in the corner held offerings to the war gods of her people. Incense burned, filling the air with sharp, spicy smoke. She held her twin blades across her knees, running a cleaning cloth along their edges even though they did not need cleaning. The motion was ritual, a way to center her mind before combat. Her eyes were closed, but her other senses remained alert. She could hear her warriors in the adjacent rooms, speaking in low voices. They were discussing the human. One of them said the human looked weak with soft skin and small muscles. Another said humans were known for their cleverness with machines but not for their fighting ability. A third warrior wondered aloud if the duel was even necessary. Perhaps the human would simply not appear, forfeiting by absence. Valora opened her eyes. He will appear, she said, her voice carrying through the walls. The conversations in the other rooms stopped immediately. The human has courage, at least. I saw it in his eyes when he accepted. Courage is not enough to win a duel, but it is enough to show up for one. Her second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Kovar, entered her quarters. He bowed respectfully before speaking. War Mistress, the station authorities have requested that you reconsider. They say the duel is causing complications. What kind of complications? The human delegation has filed formal protests. They claim their commander was provoked. Some of the other species are taking sides. The station master fears violence might break out among the spectators. Valora stood, setting her blades aside. The station master knew the laws when he built this place. Duels of honor are permitted under Galactic Convention. The human accepted my challenge properly. There is no grounds for cancellation. I agree, War Mistress. I am only delivering the message. Kovar paused. There is something else. I have been researching humans. Would you like to know what I learned? Speak. They come from a world called Earth. It is a death world by galactic classification. High gravity, violent weather, aggressive predators, and diseases that evolve rapidly. Most species would not survive a month on its surface without environmental suits. Yet humans not only survived there, they became the dominant species. Valora picked up one of her blades, testing its weight. Many species come from harsh worlds. That does not make them warriors. True, but there is something unusual about humans. Their bodies are not particularly strong or fast. They have no natural weapons like claws or venom. Their senses are average at best. Yet they conquered their entire planet. Do you know how? Tell me. Endurance and adaptation? Humans evolved as persistence hunters. They would chase prey for hours, sometimes days, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. They can run in heat that would kill other species. They can heal from injuries that would be fatal to others. And they learn. They adapt. They change their tactics constantly. Valora was quiet for a moment. Then she laughed. You worry too much, old friend. Endurance means nothing in a duel that will last minutes. And adaptation requires time, which he will not have. I will strike fast and end this quickly. It is actually a mercy. Kover bowed again. As you say, War Mistress. After he left, Valora continued her meditation, but his words lingered in her mind like smoke. She had fought many species. Some were stronger than her. Some were faster. She had defeated them all through skill and experience. This human would be no different. On the human ship, Daiho was also preparing, but his preparation looked very different. Lieutenant Hyejin had gathered all the information Earth had on Kethran physiology. It was not much. Humans had only been in space for a short time, and most of what they knew came from public databases and second-hand accounts, but it was enough to paint a troubling picture. Their skeletal structure is reinforced with a mineral compound, Hyejin explained, displaying holographic images. It makes their bones 3 times stronger than human bones. They have a double-layer muscle system that generates massive force. Their scales provide natural armor that can resist small arms fire, and their nervous system processes information faster than ours. Their reaction time is nearly twice as fast. Daiho studied the images. Weaknesses? Few. Their eyes are sensitive to certain light frequencies. Their internal temperature regulation is less efficient than ours, so extended exertion and heat could slow them, and their fighting style tends to be formal, traditional. They learn set patterns and techniques. So they are stronger, faster, and better armored than me, but they might overheat if the fight goes long and they fight by the book. Daiho rubbed his face. Not exactly reassuring. Hyejin's expression softened. Daiho, you do not have to do this. We can find another way. What other way? If I run, humanity looks weak. If I beg for mercy, humanity looks weak. The only choice is to fight and hope I can find an advantage somewhere. Another member of his crew, a young man named Jiho, spoke up. Commander, I have been reading about Kethran dueling traditions. There are rules. They fight with honor. No tricks, no deception, no striking from behind. Everything is direct and formal. Daiho looked at him. And maybe that is your advantage. You are not Kethran. You do not have to fight like them. You just have to survive long enough to make her respect the fight. The words hung in the air. Daiho turned them over in his mind. He came from a family of martial artists. His grandfather had taught him taekwondo when he was 5 years old. His father had added hapkido and traditional wrestling. Daiho had spent his youth learning not just to fight, but to think during fighting, to read an opponent, to adapt. Show me everything you have on Kethran dueling techniques, he said. Every recording, every description. I need to see how they move. They spent the night watching footage of Kethran warriors in combat. Valora's previous duels were available in the public archives, and Daiho watched them all. He saw her patterns, her preferences, the techniques she favored. He saw how she moved, how she struck, how she finished opponents. He also saw something else. She was brilliant, but she was predictable. Every Kethran fighter he watched used similar techniques. They had been trained in the same traditions for thousands of years. Their style was refined and deadly, but it was known. As dawn approached on the station's artificial cycle, Daiho finally allowed himself to sleep for a few hours. His dreams were filled with flashing blades and golden reptilian eyes. When he woke, Hyejin was sitting beside his bunk. It is time, she said quietly. Daiho nodded and rose. He dressed in his combat armor, light but strong. He strapped his blade to his side, a molecular edge weapon that Earth had developed. It was not as flashy as Kethran energy blades, but it was sharp enough to cut through almost anything. As he prepared to leave the ship, his entire crew gathered to see him off. They did not say much. What was there to say? They all knew the odds. Jiho stepped forward and bowed deeply. For Earth, he said. The others echoed him. For Earth, Deho returned the bow. Then he walked toward the arena, knowing that in a few hours he would either be dead or have changed humanity's place in the galaxy forever. The arena sat at the center of Crossing Winds Station, built into the superstructure itself. It was a massive circular space with seating that rose up in tiers, capable of holding 10,000 spectators. Today every seat was filled. Aliens pressed against the railings, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. The air buzzed with dozens of languages mixing together into a sound like rushing water. Deho entered through the Challenger's gate. The roar of the crowd hit him like a physical wave. Most of the noise was not encouraging. He heard jeers and laughter. He heard beings making sounds that his translator could not even process. Some threw things, though security barriers prevented anything from reaching the arena floor. The arena floor itself was bare metal, marked with a large circle 50 meters across. Lights blazed down from above, eliminating all shadows. There would be no place to hide, no environmental advantage for either fighter. This was intentional. Kethran dueling tradition demanded that combat be pure, decided only by skill and strength. Deho walked to the center of the circle and looked up at the crowd. He tried to find his crew among the thousands of faces but could not. Instead, he saw the Kethran section, where hundreds of scaled warriors sat in complete silence watching him with predatory focus. It was more unnerving than the jeers. A gong sounded deep and resonant. The crowd noise dropped to whispers. The Champion's Gate opened on the opposite side of the arena. Valora emerged, and the Kethran section erupted in synchronized chanting. She wore ceremonial armor that gleamed like emeralds under the lights. Her twin blades hung at her sides, their energy fields currently dimmed. She walked with the confidence of someone who had made this entrance 37 times before and had never left defeated. She crossed the arena floor and stopped 10 paces from Deho. Up close, she seemed even larger than he remembered. Her golden eyes studied him with an expression that might have been curiosity or might have been contempt. "You came," she said. "I am surprised. Many would have fled." "I gave my word," Deho replied. His voice sounded small in the vast space, but the arena's sound system amplified it so everyone could hear. "Words are wind. Actions are truth." She drew her blades in one smooth motion. They blazed to life, crackling with blue energy that cast strange shadows across her scales. "I will make this quick, human. You have courage, and courage deserves a clean death." Deho drew his own blade. It looked plain compared to hers, just polished metal with an impossibly sharp edge. "I did not come here to die, War Mistress. They never do." She settled into a fighting stance that Deho recognized from the recordings. Her weight distributed evenly. Her blades held high and low, creating a defensive matrix that could strike from any angle. "The rules are simple. We fight until one surrenders or cannot continue. Do you understand?" "I understand." A station official, a floating being made of gas contained in a transparent suit, drifted to the edge of the circle. Its voice boomed through speakers. "Let all witness this duel of honor between Valora of the Kethran Empire and Deho of Earth. Combat will begin on my signal. Fighters acknowledge." "Acknowledged," Valora said. "Acknowledged," Deho echoed. The official raised one of its appendages. The crowd fell absolutely silent. Deho could hear his own heartbeat loud in his ears. He took a breath, centering himself the way his grandfather had taught him. "Mind like water," his grandfather used to say. "Reflect everything, absorb nothing." The appendage dropped. "Begin!" Valora moved. She was faster than any being Deho had ever fought. She closed the distance between them in 3 strides, her blades already cutting through the air in a pattern designed to overwhelm an opponent with simultaneous high and low attacks. It was a classic Kethran opening, meant to force the opponent into a defensive position from which they could never recover. Deho did not try to block. Instead, he pivoted on his back foot and angled his body, letting the high blade pass inches from his face while the low blade found only empty air where his leg had been a moment before. He did not counterattack. He simply moved out of range. Valora's eyes narrowed. She attacked again, a different pattern this time, faster and more complex. Her blades wove a net of energy that seemed impossible to evade. But Deho was not trying to evade all of it. He was trying to evade just enough. He parried one blade with his own, the molecular edge turning away the energy field with a screech of disrupted physics. He ducked under the second blade and rolled aside. The crowd murmured. This was lasting longer than expected. Valora pressed her advantage, attacking with relentless precision. Each strike was aimed to kill or cripple. Each combination was a masterwork of traditional Kethran blade work, refined over millennia. But Daiho kept moving. Sometimes he blocked, sometimes he dodged. Always he stayed just beyond the reach of her killing strikes. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Daiho was breathing hard now. Valora's attacks were taking their toll even when they did not land. The sheer effort of constant movement, the adrenaline, the focus required to avoid death by inches. It was exhausting. But Valora was breathing hard too. Her scales had darkened slightly, and Daiho realized she was getting hot. The arena's temperature was calibrated for human comfort, which meant it was warmer than Kethran's preferred. More importantly, Daiho was learning. Every attack Valora made, he saw more clearly. Every pattern she used, he understood better. His grandfather used to say that all fighting was conversation. The first exchange was greeting. The second was question and answer. After that, you began to understand the language. He was beginning to understand Valora's language. Valora seemed to realize he was not tiring as fast as he should. She changed tactics, trying to corner him against the edge of the circle, but Daiho circled away, keeping to the center where he had maximum space to maneuver. She tried to bait him into attacking, leaving apparent openings, but Daiho did not take them. He could see they were traps. 20 minutes became 30. The crowd was no longer jeering. They were watching in stunned silence. Even the Kethrans had stopped their chanting. This was unprecedented. No one lasted this long against Valora. Valora herself was beginning to show frustration. Her attacks became slightly less controlled, carrying more force but less precision. Daiho could see the calculation in her eyes. She had expected to win in minutes. Every moment this continued, she lost face. But if she allowed herself to become sloppy, she would lose more than face. 40 minutes. Daiho's arms burned with fatigue. His legs felt like lead, but he kept moving, kept breathing, kept adapting. He noticed that Valora favored her right blade for power strikes and her left for speed. He noticed she had a tell before her most aggressive combinations. Her scales would flush slightly darker. He noticed that when she overextended, she took an extra fraction of a second to recover. 50 minutes. Valora launched another assault, this one with desperate power behind it. Her blades moved so fast they blurred. But Daiho had seen this pattern before. He knew where each strike would fall. He slipped to the outside of her right blade, and for the first time since the duel began, he counterattacked. His blade found the gap between her chest plate and shoulder armor. It was a small gap, barely an inch wide, but the molecular edge cut through scales and drew blood. First blood. The arena exploded with noise. Aliens leaped to their feet, screaming in 100 languages. The Kethran section sat in complete shocked silence. Valora looked down at the cut on her shoulder. It was not deep, barely more than a scratch, but blood ran down her scales, dark green against emerald. She touched it with one hand, then looked at her bloodied fingers as if she could not quite believe what she was seeing. She raised her eyes to Daiho, and for the first time there was no contempt in them. There was surprise. There was respect. And there was something else. There was fear. The blood on her shoulder was impossible to ignore. Valora touched it again, feeling the wetness, feeling the sting of the cut. In 37 duels, she had bled only twice before. Both times had been against legendary warriors from species known for their combat prowess. Never against a species like humans who were supposed to be weak, who were supposed to be easy prey. The crowd's roar faded into background noise. Valora's focus narrowed to the human standing before her. He was breathing heavily, sweat running down his face, but he was still standing, still ready, still learning. That last thought sent a chill through her, despite the arena's warmth. He was still learning. She had thrown everything at him. Every technique she had mastered over decades of training. Every combination that had felled champions. And he had not just survived, he had adapted to them. She could see it in the way he moved now, more efficiently than at the start. She could see it in his eyes, which tracked her blades with growing understanding. Kovar's words came back to her. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. They would chase prey for hours, sometimes days, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. They can run in heat that would kill other species. And they learn. They adapt. The duel had been going for nearly an hour. Valora's muscles burned. Her breath came in harsh gasps. The heat of the arena, combined with her heavy armor and the exertion of constant combat, was taking its toll. She was not exhausted yet, but she could feel exhaustion approaching like a distant storm. And the human? He looked tired, certainly, but he was still moving, still alert, still dangerous. If anything, he seemed to be finding his rhythm now, settling into the fight like a runner settling into a long-distance pace. For the first time in her warrior life, Valora realized she might not win this duel. The thought was so alien, so impossible, that it took her a moment to even process it. She was Valora, daughter of the Storm Clan, war mistress of the 3rd Legion. She had trained since childhood in the warrior traditions. She had killed beings twice her size. She had never lost, but loss was not the only possible outcome here. There was something worse than loss. Inevitable defeat. She could win this moment. She could probably land a killing blow if she threw everything into one desperate attack. But what if she missed? What if he dodged? Then she would be open, exhausted, and vulnerable. And he would strike. He would win not through superior skill in any single moment, but through superior endurance across all moments. That was the horror of it. She could see the shape of the battle now. If this continued, she would tire while he maintained his pace. Her strikes would slow while his remained constant. Eventually, hours from now perhaps, she would make a mistake born of exhaustion. And he would end it. The humans had built themselves into a weapon not of the moment but of time itself. Valora lowered her blade slightly, her mind racing. The crowd noise had become a constant roar, but she barely heard it. She was calculating, trying to find an answer to an impossible problem. How do you defeat an opponent who gets relatively stronger the longer the fight continues? Deho did not attack. He simply stood ready, watching her with those dark eyes that missed nothing. He knew, she realized. He knew he had changed something fundamental in this fight. He was waiting to see what she would do. Valora made her decision. She would end this now one way or another. She gathered her strength and launched herself forward in a rushing attack that had no subtlety, no technique, only raw power and speed. Both blades thrust forward, aimed at Deho's center mass, meant to skewer him before he could react. It was not elegant. It was not traditional. But it was all she had left. Deho saw the attack coming. There was no finesse to read, no pattern to anticipate. Just pure forward momentum. He made his choice in the fraction of a second he had. He could try to block or parry, but her strength would overwhelm him. He could try to counter, but her reach would get him first. So he did the only thing he could. He dove to the side at the last possible moment, hitting the arena floor hard and rolling. Valora's blades passed through the space where he had been, finding only air. Her momentum carried her forward, and she could not stop. She crashed into the arena's barrier wall with tremendous force. The impact rang through the entire structure. Valora bounced off the wall and fell to her knees, her blades clattering on the metal floor. Her armor had protected her from serious injury, but the collision had stunned her. She shook her head, trying to clear her vision. When her eyes focused again, she saw Deho climbing to his feet. His armor was scraped from the dive, and he was breathing even harder now, but he was unhurt. He could have attacked while she was down. The rules would have allowed it. But he had not. He was waiting for her to rise, to face him properly. Honor, she thought. The human has honor. She retrieved her blades and stood. Blood ran more freely from the cut on her shoulder now, the impact having reopened it. She could feel other bruises forming where she had hit the wall, but more than the physical pain, she felt something she had not experienced in decades. Doubt. She looked at Deho, really looked at him, and saw him for what he was. Not weak, not inferior, just different. His species had evolved under conditions so harsh that they made warriors without even trying. They had been forged in a crucible of time and endurance rather than claws and venom. They were not built to win quickly. They were built to win eventually. And eventually was a very long time. The arena had gone quiet again. The crowd sensed something had changed. Valora could feel thousands of eyes on her, waiting to see what the legendary war mistress would do. Her own people were watching. Her clan, her legion, her entire species was represented in this arena. She thought about her training. Every lesson from her masters. Every principle of Kethran honor and combat. There was a concept in the warrior tradition, rarely invoked, almost never used. Recognition. When you acknowledged that your opponent was not merely skilled, but operated from a completely different understanding of combat, that was equally valid to your own. Recognition was not surrender. It was respect. She looked down at her blades, at the blood on her scales, at the exhaustion in her muscles. She thought about the next hour, The hour after that, the inevitable conclusion. She thought about what her people needed to learn from this moment. They needed to learn that strength came in many forms, that the galaxy contained more than one definition of warrior, that judging others by your own standards could be a fatal mistake. Valora had spent her life fighting. But perhaps the greatest battle was knowing when to stop fighting. She took a deep breath and made her decision. It was the hardest decision she had ever made. Harder than any battle, harder than any campaign. But it was the right one. She stepped back and lowered her blades, not dropping them in surrender, lowering them in recognition. The arena erupted into chaos. Aliens leaped to their feet, shouting and gesturing. Some were angry, some were confused, some were amazed. The betting markets crashed as bookmakers tried to figure out how to handle this unprecedented outcome. Security personnel moved nervously, unsure if they needed to intervene. Through the chaos, Valora's voice rang out, amplified by the arena's systems. She spoke in the formal dialect of Kethran military tradition, the language used only for the most solemn occasions. The translator struggled with some of the concepts, but the meaning came through. I acknowledge you, warrior of Earth. Your way of battle is unknown to me, but I see now that it is no less deadly for its strangeness. You have earned recognition. Deho stood frozen, his blade still raised, his body still ready for combat. His mind struggled to process what had just happened. The translator had rendered Valora's words, but their meaning seemed impossible. She was lowering her blades. She was speaking words of respect. She was ending the duel, but not through surrender. Recognition. The word echoed in his mind. It was not a concept that existed in human dueling traditions. You won or you lost. You survived or you died. But recognition was something else entirely. It was an acknowledgement that the fight had revealed a deeper truth than victory or defeat could express. Valora deactivated her blades and attached them to her belt. She stood at attention, her posture straight despite the exhaustion and injury, and spoke again. This time she used the common trade language so everyone in the arena could understand without translation. I challenged you believing you were weak. I was wrong. Her golden eyes met his directly. The strength of your kind lies not in individual moments but in the long campaign. You would have won this duel, not through superior skill but through superior design. Your species has been shaped by your world to outlast anything that tries to stop you. That is a warrior's strength I have never encountered before. She placed her fist over her heart in a Kethran salute. I withdraw my challenge. The insult is forgotten. You have earned my respect, Deho of Earth. The Kethran section of the arena erupted, but it was not anger that Deho heard in their voices. It was something more complex. Some were shouting in protest, yes, but others were calling out what sounded like approval. The scarred veteran who had been with Valora earlier stood and began a chant. Other Kethrans joined in, and soon hundreds of voices were rhythmically calling out words that the translator rendered as wisdom and recognition, strength and truth. Deho slowly lowered his blade. His hands were shaking, he realized. Not from fear now, but from the adrenaline crash as his body understood the danger had passed. He had survived. More than that, he had earned something more valuable than victory. He sheathed his blade and bowed deeply, the way his grandfather had taught him to bow to a respected teacher. Your honor is intact, War Mistress Valora. You fought with courage and skill. I am honored to have faced you. Valora's scales shifted color, lightening to a shade that Deho did not recognize. Later he would learn it signified respect between warriors. She bowed in return, a smaller bow but no less sincere. The station official floated into the arena, its gaseous form swirling with colors that indicated confusion. This outcome is unusual. For the records, how should this duel be classified? Valora turned to the official. It will be recorded as recognition. Both warriors proved their worth. No further classification is needed. But the betting markets are not my concern. This duel is concluded. Valora's voice carried absolute authority. The official wisely said nothing more and floated away. The crowd was still in chaos, but security personnel were getting it under control. Deho suddenly felt lightheaded. The exhaustion he had been fighting through the entire duel came crashing down on him. His legs wobbled, and he took an awkward step to catch his balance. Valora was at his side in an instant, her hand gripping his arm to steady him. Her strength was remarkable. Even exhausted and injured, she could easily hold his full weight. Easy, human. The aftermath of battle can be as dangerous as battle itself. Your body has been running on nothing but will for the last hour. It is catching up with you now. I am okay, Deho managed, though his voice sounded distant to his own ears. No, you are not. But you will be. She looked toward the edge of the arena and called out in her own language. 2 Kethrin warriors hurried forward. Valora spoke to them quickly, then turned back to Deho. My warriors will help you to your ship. You need rest and medical attention. I can walk. Do not be foolish. You have proven your strength. You do not need to prove it again by collapsing in front of this crowd. There was almost warmth in her voice, like an amused teacher dealing with a stubborn student. The 2 Kethrin warriors approached carefully, as if unsure how to handle a human. Under Valora's direction, they supported Deho between them and began walking him toward the exit. The crowd parted before them, aliens pressing back to let them through. Deho caught glimpses of faces. Some looked disappointed that there had been no death. Others looked thoughtful. A few looked at him with something that might have been respect. As they passed through the gate, Deho saw his crew pushing through the crowd. Hijin reached them first, her face showing a mixture of relief and disbelief. Commander, you are alive. You are actually alive. Barely, Deho admitted, managing a weak smile. Hijin looked at the 2 Kethrin warriors supporting him, then at Valora, who had followed them out of the arena. What happened? The broadcast cut out when you started speaking in your formal language, Valora answered. What happened is that your commander taught me something about the galaxy. There are many kinds of strength, many ways to be a warrior. I would speak with your delegation, Lieutenant. There are matters to discuss. Matters? Hijin's hand moved unconsciously toward her sidearm. What kind of matters? Peaceful ones. I give you my word. Valora gestured to her warriors, who carefully transferred Deho's weight to Hyojin and Jiho. Take care of him. He has earned rest. I will come to your ship in 3 hours if you will receive me. Hyojin looked at Deho, who nodded slightly. 3 hours, she agreed. Valora bowed once more to Deho. Until then, warrior of Earth. She turned and walked back toward the Kethrin section, her warriors falling in behind her. The human crew managed to get Deho back to their ship. The medical officer, a woman named Sumi, immediately began treating him. He had dozens of minor cuts and bruises, several strained muscles, and was severely dehydrated. But nothing was broken, nothing was permanent. He would heal. As Sumi worked, Jiho pulled up news feeds on a display screen. The duel was the only thing anyone in the station was talking about. Footage was already being sent to Earth and to other human colonies. Analysts were discussing what it meant. Some were calling it a victory. Others were debating whether withdrawal by recognition counted as a win or a loss. A few were simply amazed that a human had lasted over an hour against a Kethrin war mistress. Look at this one, Jiho said, pointing to a particular feed. It was from a multi-species news network, and the commentator was a being Deho did not recognize. The translator rendered its words. Today the galaxy learned that humanity is not to be underestimated. They may not have the natural weapons of some species or the size of others, or the raw power of many, but they have something perhaps more dangerous. They do not quit. They outlast, they adapt. Any species considering conflict with humanity should remember this duel and think carefully. Deho closed his eyes and let the exhaustion take him. As he drifted toward sleep, his last thought was that he had not just fought for his own life today. He had fought for humanity's reputation, for Earth's place in the galaxy, and somehow, impossibly, he had won something more valuable than the duel itself. He had won respect. Outside the ship, word continued to spread. In bars and trading posts across the station, aliens who had witnessed the duel told the story to those who had not. Each telling added details, embellished moments, turned a duel into a legend. By evening, every being on crossing winds knew the name Deho. By morning, ships carrying the story would depart for 100 different worlds. And in the Kethrin section, Valora sat in meditation once more, thinking about humans and endurance and the many forms that strength could take. She thought about the Vryn Dominion and the threat they posed. She thought about allies and adaptation, and what it meant to be a warrior in a galaxy much larger and stranger than her training had prepared her for. 3 hours, she had said. In 3 hours, she would go to the human ship and begin a conversation that might change everything. 3 hours later, exactly on time, Valora arrived at the human ship. She came alone without her warriors, wearing simple armor rather than ceremonial dress. It was a calculated gesture. Coming without guards showed trust. Coming in plain armor showed this was not a formal state visit, but something more personal. Heejin met her at the airlock. The lieutenant had spent the last 3 hours running security checks and preparing for every possible scenario, from assassination attempt to diplomatic trap. But Valora simply stood at the entrance waiting to be invited in like any guest. "War Mistress," Heejin said carefully. "Welcome to the Earth vessel Morning Star. Commander Daeho is resting, but he asked to be woken when you arrived. I would speak with him if he is able, but I would also speak with you and your crew. What I have to say concerns all of humanity, not just one warrior." They led her to the ship's common area, which had been hastily cleaned and arranged to accommodate a meeting. Valora had to duck slightly through the doorways. The ship had been built for human proportions, and while the Kethrans were humanoid, they were considerably larger. Daeho was already there, sitting in a chair with a blanket over his shoulders. He looked exhausted but alert. Sumi hovered nearby, clearly unhappy that her patient was out of bed. Valora bowed to him. "How are you, warrior?" "Sore, tired, alive." Daeho managed to smile. "How is your shoulder?" "It will scar. I will wear the scar with pride." She touched the bandage that now covered the cut. "It will remind me of the day I learned humility." She sat, and the Kethran chair creaked under her weight. The human crew gathered around. Heejin, Jiho, Sumi, and 3 others. They were nervous, Valora could see. They did not yet understand why she was here. "I will speak plainly," Valora said. "My people, the Kethran Empire, face a threat we cannot defeat alone. For the past 10 years, we have been fighting a war against the Vryn Dominion. Do you know of them?" Heejin nodded. "We have heard of them. Machine intelligence that consumes biological civilizations and converts them into processing nodes. Yes, they are relentless, efficient, and utterly without mercy. They do not negotiate. They do not retreat. They simply advance world by world, species by species." Valora's scales darkened with emotion. "We Kethrans are strong. We are warriors. But we are few in number, and the Vryn are many. We have held them back through force of arms and tactical superiority. But we are losing. Slowly but certainly." "What does this have to do with humanity?" Daeho asked. "Everything." Valora leaned forward. "I have spent my life studying warfare. I understand tactics, strategy, logistics. But today you taught me something I did not know. You taught me that there are different kinds of strength. The Kethran way is to meet force with force, to fight with honor and tradition. It has served us well for thousands of years. But it is not working against the Vryn." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We need allies who can think differently, fight differently. We need species who can adapt, who can outlast, who can find solutions we cannot see. Because we are trapped in our own traditions. We need humans." The room fell silent. The weight of what she was suggesting hung in the air. Jiho spoke up. "With respect, War Mistress, humanity is very new to space. We have no major fleet, limited resources, and almost no combat experience against advanced species. What could we possibly offer against an enemy that has defeated civilizations far older than ours?" "You offer what you are," Valora said simply. "You come from a death world that shaped you into survivors. You have endured ice ages, plagues, wars, disasters. Your species has been knocked down 1,000 times and stood up 1,001. That is what we need. Not more warriors like us, but warriors who never quit." Heejin was thinking strategically. An alliance with the Kethran Empire would change humanity's position in the galaxy significantly. Other species have been dismissive of us. Your support would carry weight, it would. The Kethran Empire is respected, sometimes feared. Alliance with us would open doors that are currently closed to you. Trade routes, technology exchanges, diplomatic recognition. Valora looked at each of them in turn. "But I will not lie to you. Alliance also means sharing our war. The Vryn will become your enemy as well as ours." "They would become our enemy eventually anyway," Daeho said quietly. "Machine intelligence that consumes biological life. If they finish with your empire, they will keep expanding. Sooner or later, they reach human space. Better to fight them now with allies than later when we are alone." That is wise thinking. Valora's respect was evident. "There is another reason I am here, beyond politics and strategy. I want to understand you, your people, your way of thinking." She gestured to the ship around them. "This vessel is small, cramped, yet your crew seems content. I have been in barracks larger than this entire ship, and warriors complained constantly. Why do you not?" Sumi answered, Because this is not just a ship to us, it is home. We make it home. Home. Valora repeated the word as if testing it. Catherines have a home world, but we do not have this portable concept of home you carry with you. She looked at the decorations the crew had added to the common area. Pictures from Earth, small plants, objects that had no practical purpose but clearly had emotional value. You bring pieces of your world wherever you go. We have to, Jiho said. Humans get homesick. We need reminders of where we came from to stay mentally healthy. Homesick. Another concept Valora turned over in her mind. We Catherines do not experience this. Once we leave our home, we simply move forward. She was quiet for a moment. Perhaps this is why we are losing the war. The Vryn only move forward as well. They do not look back, do not remember, do not carry anything with them. We fight them with the same mindset. But humans, you carry everything with you. Your past, your future, your identity. You never truly leave home because you bring it with you. Deho saw where she was going. You think that perspective would help against the Vryn? I think it might. The Vryn have no past, no culture, no identity beyond their function. They cannot understand beings who fight not just for survival, but for home, for memory, for things that have no logical value. Valora stood and walked to one of the pictures on the wall. It showed Earth from orbit, blue and green and beautiful. Tell me about your world. For the next hour they did. They told her about Earth's seasons, its oceans, its forests. They told her about human diversity, the hundreds of cultures and languages. They told her about art and music and literature. They told her about families and friendships and love. Valora listened to it all, fascinated. The Catherines had art and culture, but it was centered around warfare and honor. Everything served the warrior tradition. But humans had art for art's sake, music for beauty's sake, stories just to tell stories. It was inefficient and illogical and absolutely essential to who they were. I begin to understand, Valora said finally. You fight not to win glory, but to protect this. All of this complexity and inefficiency and beauty. The Vryn cannot comprehend this. They see only resources and processing power. But you see home. Hijin brought up a star map. If we are to form an alliance, we need to understand the scope of the conflict. Show us where the Vryn front lines are. Valora studied the map and began marking positions. The Vryn controlled a wedge of space about 30 light-years deep, bordered on one side by the Kethrin Empire, and on the other by neutral space. They were expanding in multiple directions, but their main thrust was toward Kethrin worlds. They move slowly but steadily, Valora explained. Each world they take becomes a production center for more units. They do not need to rest, do not need supply lines the way biological armies do. Every battle we win, they simply build more units. Every battle they win, they grow stronger. That is a war of attrition, Deho said. And in a war of attrition, the side with more resources and production capacity wins. Exactly. We cannot match their production. We can only try to destroy them faster than they can build, but we are failing. Valora's frustration was clear. We need a different approach. What if we do not try to match their production? Jiho suggested. What if we disrupt it instead? Hit their production facilities, their command nodes, their supply routes. Wait, do they have supply routes? They have data transfer networks. Destroy those, and individual units become isolated, operating on local processing only. The crew began brainstorming. It was chaotic and disorganized, with people talking over each other and suggesting wild ideas. Valora watched in amazement. This was nothing like Kethrin military planning, which was formal and hierarchical. But there was energy here, creativity, a willingness to suggest even absurd ideas because sometimes absurd ideas led to good ones. By the time the meeting ended, they had the outline of a plan. Not a battle plan, but a framework for cooperation. Human creativity and adaptation combined with Kethrin military power and experience. It was rough, it would need development, but it was a start. As Valora prepared to leave, she turned to Deho. I must ask. During our duel, there was a moment when I was down, and you could have struck. Why did you wait? Because you were down, Deho said simply. There is no honor in striking a fallen opponent, but the rules allowed it. Part 7. The New Compact. 3 months passed like a river flowing toward the sea, carrying change in its current. The footage of the duel had spread across the galaxy, reaching even the most isolated colonies. Humanity's reputation transformed overnight. They were no longer dismissed as newcomers playing at galactic politics. They were the species that had earned recognition from a Kethran war mistress. Other species began taking human diplomats seriously. Trade negotiations that had stalled suddenly moved forward. Technology exchanges were proposed. Doors that had been closed were opened. But the real work was happening in secret in conference rooms and military facilities as humans and Kethrans learned to work together. It was not easy. The cultural differences were vast. Kethrans valued hierarchy and tradition. Humans valued flexibility and innovation. Kethran military doctrine was thousands of years old, refined through countless wars. Human military doctrine was barely decades old, cobbled together from Earth's various nations and adapted for space combat. Arguments were frequent. A Kethran general would propose a traditional flanking maneuver, time-tested and reliable. A human commander would suggest something unprecedented, risky, and possibly brilliant. The Kethrans found the humans chaotic and disrespectful of proven methods. The humans found the Kethrans rigid and unwilling to adapt. But slowly, understanding grew. Kethran officers began to see that what looked like chaos was actually rapid iteration and experimentation. Human commanders began to see that tradition carried lessons learned in blood, wisdom that should not be dismissed lightly. Valora was at the center of it all. She had become an unofficial ambassador between the species, translating not just words but concepts. She explained to her people why humans did things that seemed strange. She explained to humans why Kethran traditions mattered. She was uniquely positioned for this role because she had learned firsthand that different approaches could be equally valid. Daiho had become something unexpected as well. After the duel, he was promoted and given command of the Joint Task Force planning sessions. He was not the highest-ranking human officer, but he had something more valuable than rank: the respect of the Kethrans. When he spoke, they listened. When he suggested new tactics, they considered them seriously, rather than dismissing them out of hand. Today was the culmination of all that work. Today, the formal alliance would be signed. The ceremony took place on Kethros, the Kethran homeworld. It was a planet of red stone and purple vegetation, orbiting a star that burned slightly hotter than Earth's sun. The air was thinner and drier than humans preferred, but environmental suits made it manageable. The signing ceremony was held in the Hall of Warriors, a massive structure carved from a single piece of red rock over 2,000 years ago. The walls were covered with names. Every Kethran warrior who had died in battle for the Empire was recorded here. There were millions of names, maybe billions. It was a sobering reminder of the cost of warfare. Representatives from dozens of species had come to witness the event. Some were allies of the Kethrans, present to show support. Others were neutral parties, curious to see what this new alliance meant for the balance of galactic power. A few were known to trade with the Vryn Dominion, present perhaps to gather intelligence. Daiho stood in the human delegation, wearing his dress uniform. Beside him was Hyejin, now promoted to commander herself and assigned as his second-in-command of the joint forces. Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council was present, along with several admirals and generals who had made the long journey from human space. The Kethran delegation stood across from them. Valora was there, wearing full ceremonial armor that gleamed like emeralds in the hall's lighting. Beside her stood the High Commander of the Kethran military, an ancient warrior named Korvax whose scales were pale with age and whose eyes had seen wars the humans could barely imagine. Between the delegation stood a simple stone table. On it lay two documents written in both Kethran script and human languages. The treaty itself was dozens of pages of carefully negotiated terms, but it boiled down to something simple: mutual defense, shared technology, and combined operations against the Vryn Dominion. High Commander Korvax stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. The Kethran Empire has stood for 10,000 years. We have fought countless wars. We have defeated enemies that other species fled from. We have held the line against darkness time and time again. He paused, his eyes sweeping across the assembled crowd. But we are not arrogant enough to believe we can stand forever alone. He turned to the human delegation. Humanity is young. By our standards, you have barely begun your journey among the stars. But youth is not weakness. Youth brings new perspectives, new energy, new ideas. 3 months ago, one of your commanders taught us that lesson in blood and honor. Today, we formalize what that duel began. recognition between warriors, alliance between peoples. Earth's ambassador stepped forward. Her name was Yunji, and she had spent 30 years in diplomatic service before humanity even reached the stars. She spoke calmly, but her words carried across the hall. Commander Deho did not fight alone in that arena. He carried with him the spirit of humanity, our stubbornness, our refusal to quit, our determination to survive no matter the odds. These are gifts from our harsh world, from the millions of years our species struggled to endure. Today we offer these gifts to our new allies. In return, we ask to learn from your wisdom, your strength, your 10,000 years of experience. She approached the table, picked up an ornate pen, and signed the treaty. The stroke of her signature seemed loud in the quiet hall. She stepped back, and High Commander Korvax came forward and signed as well, using a Kethran writing tool that left marks in red ink that looked almost like blood. It was done. The hall erupted in sound. Some species cheered. Others made noises of approval in their own ways. A few remained silent, already calculating what this alliance meant for their own interests. But in the human delegation, Deho felt something profound. They had truly joined the galactic community now. Not as observers or junior partners, but as equals with something valuable to contribute. His duel with Valora had opened the door, but what came next would be up to all of them. The formal ceremony concluded, but a reception followed in an adjacent hall. Here the atmosphere was less formal. Aliens mingled, sharing drinks and conversation. Deho found himself surrounded by beings wanting to hear about the duel firsthand. He told the story modestly, downplaying his own role, but they wanted every detail. Eventually, he managed to extract himself and found a quiet corner. Valora joined him a moment later, carrying 2 containers of liquid. She offered him one. "What is it?" he asked. "Kethran's celebration drink. Do not worry. I checked that it is safe for human consumption. It will not harm you, though you may find the taste strong." Deho took a sip. It was indeed strong, burning slightly as it went down, with a flavor like spiced metal and distant smoke. Interesting. The diplomat's word for "I do not like this, but I am too polite to say so." Valora's scales shifted to a lighter shade that he had learned meant amusement. "You do not have to finish it. No, it is growing on me." He took another sip. "Did you ever think 3 months ago that we would be here?" "No. 3 months ago I expected to kill you in the arena and move on with my life. Instead you survived, taught me humility, and now we are allies. The galaxy is strange. What do you think happens next?" Valora was quiet for a moment, looking out over the crowd. "Next we fight. The Vryn will not stop because we signed a treaty. If anything, they may accelerate their advance now that we have shown we are working together. So we fight and we learn and we try to find a way to win an unwinnable war." "Wars are only unwinnable until someone figures out how to win them," Deho said. "More human optimism? No, human history. We have fought plenty of unwinnable wars. Sometimes we lost. But sometimes we found a way." He looked at her directly. "That is what you need from us, is it not? Not just our endurance, but our refusal to accept that any situation is truly hopeless." "Yes," Valora said softly. "That is exactly what we need." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching the celebration. Representatives from dozens of worlds were here, talking and making deals. The signing of the treaty had shifted the political landscape. Some species were already discussing their own alliances, worried about being left behind. Others were offering trade agreements, wanting to be connected to this new power block. Hiejin approached, looking both excited and overwhelmed. "Commander, I have been talking with the Kethran military planners. They want to begin joint operations within 2 weeks. 2 weeks? We barely have time to integrate our systems, let alone plan coordinated attacks." "Then we will have to work fast," Deho said. "What are they proposing?" "A strike on a Vryn production facility near the border. They say it is a priority target, heavily defended but strategically vital. If we can destroy it, we set back their expansion by months." Valora nodded. "It is the right target. We have been planning this operation for over a year, but we lacked the forces to execute it. With human ships and tactics added to our strength, it becomes possible." "Possible is not the same as likely," Hiejin pointed out. "Hi, Veli."